Hi, everybody. Today I want to talk about something that I think many artists avoid for a very long time. Not because it is difficult technically, but because it is difficult emotionally. Looking at our own work. Not the work we wish we made, not the work we save on Pinterest, not the work we admire on museum walls. Our work, our actual body of work, the things we keep returning to, even unintentionally. The colors, the moods, the themes, the shapes, the obsessions, the silences. I think there comes a moment in every artist's life where external inspiration starts becoming less useful. Not useless, but not sufficient. And if we do not eventually turn inward, we risk becoming collectors of influences instead of builders of a voice. So by the time you're watching this, I am probably in a transit hotel dealing with the last few details before moving back to Brazil. But I still have quite a few videos that I didn't release previously because at the time I didn't think they were good enough. But I decided to share them anyway, partially because I think it is part of our philosophy in this community. And there is value in being honest about the work that doesn't quite meet our expectations, and partially because those imperfect pieces are just as much part of who we are as the successful ones. So failure, hesitation, wrong turns, and unfinished ideas, they all leave marks on us. They shape our judgment, they shape the work that comes next. And if we only show the victories, we end up telling an incomplete story. The paintings we struggle with, the ideas that don't fully land, and the work we are tempted to hide, they often teach us as much as our best pieces ever do. So this week, I decided to do something simple. As I was organizing the piles of the paintings we did for the sake of these exercises, I laid out some of them and tried to observe them honestly, not as separate images, but as evidence. Evidence of patterns, evidence of instinct, evidence of what keeps pulling me back. And what I noticed was that there were things repeating themselves even when I was not consciously trying to repeat them. The muted faces, the strong contrast, the isolations, the limited palettes, the quiet tension. So even when I was trying different styles and techniques, the compositions felt related somehow because those elements were constant in every session. And I think this is important because many artists spend years asking, what should my style be? But often the answer is already sitting quietly inside the work they have already made. The issue is that we are usually too distracted comparing ourselves to others to notice it. We have already mentioned this several times. I think this is one of the biggest reasons artists feel stagnant, not because they are not progressing, but because they are measuring their progress against someone else's destination. And that creates a very distorted perception because when you compare your work to somebody else's finished language, your own voice always sound incomplete. Of course it will. The artists you admire may have been speaking visually for years, 10, 20, 30 years. That comparison is unfair from the very beginning. And I think this constant comparison also creates another problem. It disconnects us from our own instincts. Instead of asking, what feels true to me, we start asking, what is working for them? We are trying to control every reaction before the work even exists. We do this in our daily routines, okay? We do this when we prepare our meals or when we are arranging the furniture around the house, when we are preparing ourselves to have guests, when we are going to shop, when we are doing anything related to the people that are close to us, our family, our friends, our co-workers, the people we meet in the street. We want to be in control of everything. And that also means that we want to control their reactions. That's not only saddening, that is a very dangerous thing. And if you do that, please just take a break, breathe, and try to learn to let things go. Let things flow. And I think that most importantly, flow with them. It's okay not to have control of everything all the time. And we are not right all the time, okay? So when people are over controlling what they do, they want the painting to be already understood. They want the painting to be already approved, validated. But art does not work like that. The more calculated every decision becomes, the less alive the work often feels. Because now the painting is no longer an exploration, it becomes a negotiation. And audiences can feel that. They may not have the language to explain it, but they can feel the hesitation inside the work. And this is why I think there is something very beautiful about remaining truthful in your work, even when that truth is not universally celebrated. You're not being stubborn, you're not being close-minded, you're just being truthful, because validation is unstable. If your relationship with anything depends entirely on approval, eventually you will become creatively exhausted. You will begin adapting yourself endlessly, softening edges, removing strangeness, removing tension, removing honesty, until the work becomes acceptable but emotionally anonymous, faceless, empty, without any feeling to share, any story to tell. So honestly, I think many artists arrive there, okay? Technically skilled, but emotionally disconnected, because they spend too much time asking what people wanted instead of asking what they themselves could not stop returning to. And this is where reviewing our own work becomes so valuable. Not to judge ourselves, not to punish ourselves, but to observe ourselves, to notice what keeps surviving, because trends change, audiences change, but certain instincts remain, and those instincts matter. For example, maybe you keep painting solitude, maybe you keep simplifying faces, maybe your work always becomes darker no matter how colorful you began. Maybe you avoid detail. Maybe you exaggerate detail. Maybe your compositions keep becoming theatrical. Maybe they keep becoming minimal. I don't know. You look at your work and see what those maybes are, okay? Because that repetition is not necessarily lack of creativity. Sometimes it is identity trying to reveal itself. And I think many artists become embarrassed by repetition, but repetition is often where depth begins. Writers revisit themes, filmmakers revisit emotions, musicians revisit structures. So the issue is not repetition itself, the issue is unconscious repetition, okay? That distinction matters because that requires honesty. Part of artistic maturity is learning how to separate authentic instinct from protective habit, and that takes time. And I also want to mention something important. I know many artists carry criticism very personally. Someone dislikes the work and suddenly it feels like rejection of the self. But these are not the same thing. If someone does not connect with your painting, it doesn't mean they dislike you. And I know that sounds obvious intellectually, but emotionally, we often confuse them too. Not only with our work, but with anything that we do. I don't like your cooking. I don't like you. I don't like the city you are coming from. I don't like you. I don't like the TV show or the movie that you like. I don't like you. So those are completely different things, okay? And we have got to learn to be mature enough to separate those, okay? Here is the reality. We have a completely different relationship with our own work because we know the history behind it. I have already mentioned that several times. We know the failed versions, we know the doubts, the references, the emotional context, we know the hours, the corrections, the meaning we projected into certain decisions, but most people do not see any of that. And honestly, I think accepting this can be liberating because it removes this impossible pressure of needing every person to fully understand everything immediately. Some people will connect deeply, some people will not. And that's okay. You don't understand everything around you. So it is unfair on you and of you to expect that everybody understands you immediately. Okay? And that level of clarity matters. And I think this is why finding inspiration within your own portfolio can become such a powerful exercise because eventually you stop chasing random validation and start building continuity, a relationship with your own language. And maybe that language changes over time. It probably will. But at least now the evolution belongs to you, not to trends, not to algorithms, you. And honestly, I think there is peace in that. Not comfort, not certainty, but peace. The peace of understanding that your work does not need to become everything. It only needs to become more truthful. And maybe that is enough. So these are the results of what we've done today. And I hope you've learned something new today. And I also want to take the moment to thank you all for your patience and support over the next couple of months because I am, as mentioned, moving back to Brazil and my schedule is going to be a bit irregular. So I am deeply and incredibly grateful to those of you who keep coming back. So thank you so very much for being here and supporting this journey. As always, keep on practicing and thank you for joining us.